Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. We're just waiting for a few more attendees to join, so just bear with us and we will start in 3 or 4 minutes, I should think. So just hold on. Good morning, everyone. We'll start in a couple of minutes for those who've just joined. Just bear with us. Great, let's kick things off then. Morning, everybody. We've got quite a few people joined already. So welcome to the Conversion Elite and Creative CX webinar. This is actually the first one in a series for Conversion Elite. And today we'll be focused on experimentation democratization. What does it really mean? And the key thing today, I think, at Creative CX, we've been spending a lot more time these days, not just working with a single optimization team, not just working on optimizing digital experiences, but actually trying to spread the word of experimentation throughout organizations, trying to, and that inevitably means working with a lot of different teams. So therefore, we thought it would be a great idea to get a couple of experimentation managers who are actually right in the thick of things and who've had to do this at their organizations. So I'd like you to welcome Tasha Senior from Sky. So Tasha, if you can turn on your video now and say hi to everybody.
Morning.
Like a big reveal, isn't it?
Surprise.
And Sam Ingleston from DAZN as well. Hi, Sam. How are you doing?
Morning, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. Yeah, looking forward to a useful and insightful session. So yeah, thanks, Chris, for having me on.
Great. So just a bit of housekeeping first. You'll see on the right-hand side is a chat function. If you can, as soon as you have any questions as we go through, if you can put your questions in there, we will cover them off at the end of the session, or you never know, we might pull a few up halfway through as well. So just anything that comes into mind that you'd like to ask Tasha or Sam, then just type it in there and we'll get going. And a little bit of a plug as well. So the Conversion Elite, Jackie and the team, they're going to do actually a physical event. So we've been back and forth on this quite a lot, and it's a big thing really to do, probably one of the first conversion experimentation conferences, actually making it a physical event. And they decided to do it in March. It was originally a little bit earlier, but we think March will be the safe time to do it. So you'll hear more about this, but it's just keep your eyes open for more adverts on it as we go through over the next few months. So to start off with, Tasha, tell us a little bit about yourself and about your role. That'd be great.
At Sky, but specifically for the service side of things. So Sky.com is split into several areas, and my team, we look after the My Account and Help area. So that means we've got a slightly different metric that we look at. We don't look at orders, we don't look at conversions, we look at trying to reduce calls. So we're trying to improve the experience on .com to encourage customers to self-serve themselves so they don't need to call the call center. And that reduces calls for us, ultimately. And that's what we do at Sky.
Great, thanks, Tasha. And Sam?
Sam Ingleston, work in the subscription side of the business at DAZN, which is a pretty broad realm. So looks after optimization, experimentation across all of our different marketing channels and business development arms. So distribution partners, telco partners, looking at how we can experiment at scale across all of our different acquisition channels. So been at DAZN for about 18 months now. Started in a sort of siloed CRO team and sort of like moved the model over to embedding those CRO research principles into the wider marketing and BD teams. So yeah, it's been a pretty eventful last 18 months, pretty busy, but yeah, it's been pretty good, and yeah, so it's really excited to be on this one with you, Chris, and yeah, looking forward to it.
Great, thanks, Sam. And yeah, that's me. I'm Chris. I'm the Chief Experience Officer at CreditCX. So we're an experimentation consultancy. So very specialized in that area. But like I was saying earlier, a lot of the time these days is actually just getting all the processes, helping our clients to get more people in experimentation and more teams involved in that. So, right, let's crack on. So I thought the first thing to talk about really would be, I think it'd be quite useful for people to hear what a typical day at Sky is for you, Tasha, as an experimentation manager. And also, if you have a particular experiment you'd like to talk through, something maybe, but you're a favorite of yours, perhaps.
Yeah, sure. So as a team, we look after all the service. So we're talking about areas such as .com, the app, the IVR, which is the automated voice service you hear when you call up. We look after the community, we look after the bots. So we've got a wide area to look at. So we spend a lot of time with our stakeholders. So in a typical week, I would meet several POs, and with me would be someone from data and someone from UX. And we go, right, what's on the roadmap? What's next? Right, what do we need to do to make sure that is successful for our customers? Do we need to do some MVP experiments before we release it as like a back-end test? Or do we just want to try and see what happens? So we discuss it as a group. It's not just me. It's not just the product owner deciding. It's a group of people from content, people from design and analytics, as I just said. And we go, right, okay, what do we want to do? How do we do that? Who needs to be involved to get this live, sort of thing. And then when the results come back, we'd again discuss that as a group. If it was successful, we'd go, right, let's roll it out. If it was inconclusive or it failed, we'd go, right, why has it done that? Do we need to do some more data, look at it again and test again? Let's keep improving this journey till we get the result that we want. So a lot of time is spent doing that and encouraging people to do that. And I suppose the other side of it is just ensuring people understand experimentation still. There's a lot of people that know they need to do it, but do they understand all the principles? So it's a big education piece that goes on in the background. And for a good experiment that we've done, I will say my favourite. So we have a side of the help side of .com, which is called One Help Expert. And what that is it's a replica of the help side of sky.com. It's for experts only, so the advisors. So it's an exact replica with expert content included. So we asked our advisors, experts as we call them, what improvements do you want to see? And as I said, it's exactly the same as the customer one. And they were just like, can you change on the homepage this customer content to expert content? You'd think it'd be pretty simple. There was a few tech issues that meant we couldn't use Optimizely web as we thought, and we couldn't have the resource to do it server-side testing. So there was a lot of people involved to get this experiment going. So I'm talking tech, I'm talking legal, I'm talking analytics, I'm talking our team, and it took a long time to get this up and running. But at the end of it, we got some pretty good results. What we're trying to do from an advisor point of view, instead of reducing calls, we're looking at reducing average handling time. So the amount of time an advisor spends on the phone. And that, again, was difficult. But I think we reduced it by simply changing content by 30%, which is a lot of money to save. And at the end of the experiment, we sent these results back to the advisors that suggested it and went, right, this was your idea. We went away and did it. And this is the result on the back of it. And they absolutely loved it. And we're really excited about the fact that their ideas came forward. And now we've got too many ideas from them that we can't get through.
Oh, that's a great example. Did the original idea come from them?
Yes, it did.
So that's because that's a bit different to a lot of people, isn't it? I mean, a lot of people with a smaller team, they almost have to work on the ideas themselves. But I guess that's a big move, isn't it? Moving the idea generation to the individual teams. It's like that important step, isn't it?
Advisors have the best ideas by far. They are the ones talking to the customers every day, and it's an insight that is invaluable. It's the sort of insight you can't find in analytics at all. So it's very, very useful to speak to them, just to get ideas. Spending a day with one of them makes a huge difference to our testing plan.
Oh, no, fascinating. Why did you need to involve the revenue team in the discussions?
Because they have to mark our homework. So everything we do is put through finance just to ensure we can get budget at the end of it. So a lot of things we do. So when COVID hit, for example, every idea a product owner had to go through an experiment so they could sign off the budget at the end of it, which was great fun for us.
Well, that happens after the experiment.
Yes.
I see. No, fascinating. That's really good. Great experiment. Thank you for sharing, Tasha. And Sam.
So yeah, it's a good question, Chris. So I think first and foremost, a typical day at DAZN for me would be focusing on like tooling improvements. So I think we're pretty well versed in terms of self-serve experimentation at DAZN. So I'm obviously working closely with a lot of like marketing channels, our paid media, online and offline acquisition channels. But a big part of my role is to almost make the statistical side of that a lot easier and building out tooling that can make their lives a lot easier. So currently I'm looking at like the Optimizely events API and looking at ingesting experiments that potentially are not run they're off-platform experiments. So, for example, across like CRM or across Push, and actually ingesting them back into Optimizely, so you get all of the reporting and statistical capabilities that Optimizely offers, even though you haven't actually run the experiment in Optimizely. So that's like an ongoing project that I'm looking at the moment, and I say that's going to have some really interesting output, because ultimately that takes the onus away from the teams, reduces me and the analytics guys as a bottleneck, automates a lot more of their day-to-day experiments, and they're running a pretty high velocity testing program. So we're hopeful that can be a little bit of a game changer for some of their processes. So that's taken up quite a bit of my time at the moment, but something that's really interesting that's going on. I think I often have to deal with quite a few management requests as well. I think one thing that I'm pretty proud of is that we've done a good job of getting like senior leadership on board with experimentation, and it's very much top down in terms of drilling that into the team, saying we can't deploy these campaigns without an experiment being attached to them. Product releases, every single product release has an experiment attached to it. So I think we've done a pretty good job of that with management, and that does mean that we often get a lot of like admin requests, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing, because I say it probably shows how far we've come in the last couple of years. But that can range from can you tell me all of the experiments that drove our North Star, or can you for the month or for the quarter, or it could be what can we do to support you for experiment growth? What's the opportunity cost here? So I often get requests. I've got a couple of them on my plate this week. And just generally, there's a lot of catch-ups, as Tasha was saying. So if this ranges from just general checks with teams that are already sort of pretty well embedded in terms of self-serve. So people like Paid Social get a lot of statistical capabilities out of Facebook and some of their other paid acquisition channels. But if you're looking at some of the newer teams to experimentation, like the BD teams, for example, then there's a lot more hand-holding that you need to do from the off. So it ranges from just general health monitoring to actually let's walk you through, let's hold your hand through every step of the journey. So it kind of ranges for different teams, but it's a really good chance for me to actually sort of dissect where they're at in the maturity perspective. So those catch-ups are really quite helpful as well. I will do a little bit of peeking of the experiments. I know that's a bit of a controversial one with some of the people on the call, but we're using a sequential stats engine, so we can get away with a little bit of peeking. And I will just do a general check just to make some stakeholders at ease in terms of the bigger, more risky experiments that we're running as well. Just improving some of our automation flows for analysis as well, building out some new data pipelines and tooling, as I say. So that's what a typical sort of day at DAZN for me would look like.
Great, no, thanks, Sam. It sounds like a lot of the work is you're working on the capability of experimentation, almost working on so that many other people can then increase the velocity and actually run the experiments themselves. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly that. And I think we are trying to make the hard bits about experimentation easy for them, right? So, I've sort of learned that from working in CRO in previous places and migrating it to a proper experimentation function, that getting to grips with like statistical concepts for, marketing teams, BD teams, that's very hard for people to get their head around. You need to invest a lot of time to get to grips with the statistical concepts that we're using, right? And it's pretty unrealistic to expect people to know how to calculate, different statistical calculations from the off, right? So a big part of my job is to explain the concepts, not necessarily the calculations to them, but just know what the concepts are, and know what you're reporting on. So it's sort of taken away some of the hard bits of experimentation and making it easier to actually build up their confidence. And I think that's a big part of democratization. I know we'll touch on this a little bit later, is so those guys have the confidence to run their own experiments. If you're a bottleneck for statistics, then it's gonna slow them down. They're gonna start to not be as confident with experimentation. So I think a big part of my job is to remove the bottleneck, embed self-serve, and make this process as easy and seamless as possible for these guys. So we're consistently building out tooling to do that.
That's really good. And I guess the role has changed from when you started on the CRO quite a bit.
Yeah, so I was pretty siloed. I was a one-man band at the time, just with working in a pretty siloed team. And I started just thinking, this is, we need to move the model. We've got so much potential here with the wider marketing team. We have a huge marketing team, business development team, and yeah, it was just about not necessarily forgetting CRO, but embed the CRO principles of research and experimentation into those teams. So a lot of what I've been doing is around evangelism as well. So obviously it's a technical specialist role, my one, but evangelism does naturally come with the role. And we've gone around the business, run lots of training. We've run lots of like shepherding sessions. We partnered with our North Star team to talk about how we can, embed data-led decisioning against the North Star through experimentation. And yeah, all of these sessions have sort of just helped us build out just a good culture and, embed those research principles and data-led decisioning. So I think, looking at it now, we've done a good job in embedding self-serve, but still a massive, still a really, really long way to go. And I think there's huge amounts of potential still within the marketing realm. And I think that's, not just at the DAZN, I think in experimentation in general, I think across the marketing disciplines, there's huge amounts of potential.
Great. No, that's really good insight, Sam. Thank you. So the big question really is, what does experimentation democratization mean to you two, really? Because I know it's one of those words that is thrown around quite a lot.
You didn't ask me for my favorite experiment, Chris.
Oh, sorry. Go. All right. What is your favorite experiment, Sam?
I think there is some good ones I'm pretty proud of at the minute. So yeah, I'm happy to share. So we've been doing a lot of quasi experimental methods at the moment. So using like geo-targeted control and treatment groups to actually monitor the impact of some of our offline marketing campaigns. So hypothetical example here, but say, for example, putting different, billboard or out-of-home campaigns in Milan, not running them in Rome, and then running some causal impact analysis to actually look at whether we see a spike on top of our actual predictions. So these have been really useful for our marketing teams to give them knowledge to say, is it worth us investing in this channel? Where should we double down? Are we seeing gains in out-of-home here or in radio here? And they've been, whatever the output of that result, all of these outcomes are really, really useful for us. Whether it's flat, then we know, right, okay, maybe this channel isn't driving any incremental subs. If it's up, yes, great, we've driven incremental subs. If it's down, maybe we're pissing them off with the amount of advertising that we're giving them. So yeah, these sort of quasi experiments have been really, really useful for us. And I think we'll be ramping up a lot of these by the end of the year.
Yeah, that's super interesting, because I think sometimes people just pigeonhole experimentation as only UI, front-end UI tests, and then it limits a massive potential that experimentation has in an organization if you only ever focus on the front-end UI and possibly only on web as well. You don't go into server-side, or you don't go into kind of quasi experiments. I always think that it's you guys' role is to work out how to create the best experiment, how to give them the answers they need, and how to validate, no matter what it is, even if it's a radio advert, like you said, Sam. Yeah,
I think incrementality in marketing and working out how many incremental subs you drove, the incrementality of each marketing channel. It's hard, right? To get that knowledge, it's really tough. And I think these experiments, they're not the silver bullet for what channel works, but it helps you build up a story, right? As you run more and more of these, so causal impact analysis pieces, you can start to build out a picture and say, right, has radio been the best channel for us? We've run X amount of experiments here, geo experiments, and we haven't seen any incremental lift on any of these. Do we think this is worth being part of the strategy for next year? It can really help you start to build up a really good story. So I'm a big advocate for these type of experiments. And I think like eBay, for example, have run some really good experiments around like branded paid search and the impact of using your brand keyword. Recommend people check out some of their research study papers on this as well, because it's really, really interesting stuff.
Great. And it's just like with the advisors at Sky. I mean, you wouldn't normally think that you could do A/B testing on that side of things, and I don't think a lot of people do they?
No, it's definitely something we've tried to explore and something we want to look in further. But it'd be fascinating to do it properly and split them and do an A/B test of what happens if we split you in half and go, right, you do this with the customers and you do this. It's definitely an area we want to look at.
Cool, great. So everyone's seen this slide before, but I wonder what this does mean for you guys, because I know it means different things to different people. What do you think it really, what's the point of it, you know, really? And also, what does it mean to you in the way that you work?
I can go first. So I think for me, it's sort of what I was alluding to earlier, where it's about confidence, right? You know, everyone across the org should feel confident enough to run an experiment, and it's my job to build up that confidence in the teams, whoever I'm working with. But I mentioned earlier, I am working primarily across the subscription realm, but I also work with like revenue teams, strategy teams, finance teams as well, and help deliver some of their experiments. So it's about taking it across the org and building up confidence that people can come to me and say, where do I go to run this experiment? You know, is this difference real, or is it just down to chance? You know, they've got the confidence, and I think that comes for like unification of the process. So I think we've done a pretty good job. I'm lucky to work with a really talented product experimentation team. And, you know, we've worked together to actually go around the business and just template that process. You know, we've got like 7 steps on the slide that we will go and we'll sort of drill to all different areas of the business, you know, whether you're, you know, in the commercial side of the business or not. We've presented this slide and we'll just say, this is what every experiment, this is the process every experiment should go through. If you go through this, you've done a pretty good job of running that experiment. So it's about unifying this, making sure all of the teams are singing from the same hymn sheet, so to speak. And yeah, by templating that process, it's just allowed us to build up a lot more confidence in the process, where, you know, teams that, as I mentioned before, like telco partners, distribution partners, we're now able to actually communicate with these guys on an ongoing basis about experiments that they're wanting to run. So it's been pretty useful for us to do a lot of evangelism on that side of things, really.
Great, thanks, Sam.
For us, the service side of Sky is big. There's a lot of people involved, and the experimentation team is a team of 3. So there is a saying across Sky that we say, which is test and learn. Right, we want to test everything we do and we want to learn from it. But the methodology behind that is probably slightly different in every team. And as a team of 3, we cannot get across everyone to ensure that they're doing it correctly. So for us, the education's really, really important here. It's about working with these people individually and ensuring they understand what they're doing. I mean, personally, for me, my proudest moments is someone asking me to go on a call with them for support, and them just talking about experimentation, how it runs, what statistical significance in, and they don't need me at all. They've run away with it. They know what they're doing. They don't need it. I can trust them to go get on with that, pretty much. And that is what we're trying to achieve at Sky. We're trying to give everyone the tools to be able to do that themselves. We're getting a lot of situations where people in different departments are coming to us saying, oh, you're the guys that do the experimenting. I want to get involved. I want to be the first one in my team to do that. They're like, I've got all these great ideas. Like, can we do this? Can we do that? And that's great. That people are generally coming to us with interest to do that. And that's through everyone talking about experimentation. It all starts in digital. But if anyone comes to digital, experimentation is part of that conversation too. We just need to grow it outwards to ensure that everyone's got the methodology right, as Sam was saying there. I mean, that sounds great, what he's doing, but there's just so many people, and as a team of 3, there's just not enough of us yet.
I think a lot of it as well is, from speaking from experience, is moving the ways of thinking from testing being like a marketing tactic, which has sort of been perceived as in the past, right? Moving it from a marketing tactic to a science. And, you know, a lot of that education is around, you know, you treat this experiment with the same amount of statistical rigor that you would testing of a new drug, or say like vaccine at the moment, whatever. You would treat it with that same rigor and not just treat it as, oh, we as a marketing tactic, we're just testing for getting, for the sake of it, but actually moving it to treat this, like you would, that they would in sort of like a medical research. And yeah, I think that hitting that home as well, I think is really, really important.
Yeah, and it's about saying we're taking. I work with a lot of people that've got some old-fashioned thinking, and it's about telling them that their opinion's not the most important here. It's the customers, and I can help you get the customer's opinion. And they're like, really? They're like, yeah. So again, it is changing that mindset. It's their opinion is not the most important. It's that data. It's the customer needs to decide this at the end of the day.
It's a good point, Tasha, I think. And again, in that education piece, it's making them aware that, as humans, we are bad at assessing the value of our ideas, right? And if we run into, if new teams that are just onboarding with experimentation, if you run into a few losing tests or flat tests, don't get too disheartened. This is normal. You've seen, probably everyone on the call, imagine seen that Netflix Slack quote where they talk about, 90% of what they do is actually wrong. So, making people aware that, don't be disheartened, just naturally as humans, we're bad at assessing the value of our ideas. People overestimate probabilities, so I think, again, in that education piece, don't be disheartened if you don't get, the big wins straight away. It's just not realistic. And I think people get caught up with that, don't they, sometimes? But yeah, I think it's our job to bring them back into a bit of a reality check as well.
But that's a tough pill to take, isn't it? To almost start discovering that all your ideas and all that expertise you have in your particular field, actually, you're not right all the time. Do you think that's quite tough for some people?
It is. It's basically trying to get them to be comfortable with failing. And that some of them get really upset when they don't. It's like, no, you haven't failed. You've learned something. And that's going to be far more valuable than just to win and we go, yeah, we implemented it. What's next? Like, it's good to fail, it's good to learn, and it's good to move on from that sort of thing. And yeah, it's the failure is scary for a lot of people. They're terrified that their ideas are going to fail.
Oh, it's flipping it on the other side though. It's like, you've not failed, you've saved the business this amount of money from not rolling this out, or you saved our conversion rates from not rolling this out. So that's sort of the way that we try and flip it. But I think it's so important to make sure because people get disheartened by it. They'll be quite quick to give up, and that's not what we want. You've not done your job if people are just running one experiment. It's consistency. It's month after month of consistent velocity and good experiments. So yeah, I think it's a big thing to make people clear that it's pretty normal in our space for this to happen.
And you mentioned a uniform process. How regimented, how kind of strict are you with that? And who kind of, is it your job to police them as such?
Yeah, so we just have like a pretty unified, as I say, 1 to 7 step process, which leads from problem identification all the way to how do you take action and share the learnings. And yeah, I think we're pretty well drilled in it in some areas, but obviously new teams that you're onboarding, I think sometimes you may have the thing where I'll bite my tongue on the odd occasion and say, right, just for the sake of I want you to get experimenting and see the value in this, I might let them off on if they do a couple of things or just to get started on gut feel. But obviously, ideally, we would say go away, and we'll educate them to say go away and run your own research. So I've started embedding like usertesting.com into the wider marketing teams, things like this, so they can go away and actually run some of their own research. And I think that's a good way for those guys to actually come to the table with some data-driven hypotheses. But I certainly won't be a blocker, because I don't want to be a bottleneck for teams, right? I want people to have free reign to experiment. And if that's, a few hurdles in the offing just to get to where I want to get to in the long run, then I'll probably take the hit for the moment. And that's probably not the best answer, but that's the way that I want to sort of just build up a bit of momentum for the program, really.
We do the same at Sky. We get a lot of people that have gone, just been on Virgin's website. They do this, you're going to do this. I'm like, excuse me, why? What's the problem statement? Oh, I like it. It's just the right thing to do. I actually had one person say, I can feel it in my waters that this is the right thing to do. And like trying to push them back to get data is obviously the right thing to do, but they're coming from a background where that's just never been important. So it's kind of good to get them to do that first experiment and let it fail. I mean, I've not had many situations where it's won. Normally their gut idea fails, and then they start to listen, and then they go, oh, you said that would happen. I was like, yeah, right. Do you want me to tell you why it's failed? And they're like, yeah, okay. And then I've got recommendations what we should do next. And that gets them started on that data journey. That first test is that first bit of data. And we can expand on that and work with them together for them to understand that they need data to get a good hypothesis, to do a good experiment. And yeah, letting them fail has been very beneficial sometimes.
That's fascinating. It's almost like it's a step that should be in everybody's kind of maturity plan for getting people on board with experimentation.
You learn the most. You learn the most from your failures, right? You know, the doing. You can tell people this, but they would only learn when they experience the failure themselves. And I think that's in any realm of life, right? You know, you learn on the job. You learn as you go. So I think, you know, you've just got to be accepting of that fact and think, you know, the benefits you're getting in for the program in the long run by people doing this. I think it's fine. I think, you know, it's quite rare that we would run that sort of experiment. But if a new team come to me now and did that, then I would be pretty open to being like, yeah, just go away and, you know, have a go, give it, you know, run your experiment and get excited about experimentation, you know?
I imagine you wouldn't let anything go off though. I suppose it's kind of a case, isn't it? How extreme, how stupid an idea would you let go live?
I think you have to practice what you preach and say my opinion is no more valid than anyone else's. Unfortunately, I think that's the reality of what we're doing. And I think, you know, you've got to practice what you preach. And it may be a case of, you know, if it's something catastrophic, you might be go away and run a bit of research. You know, go away and do your research and come back to us. Or, you know, obviously for experiments, they still need to go through some form of governance process. We keep the right stakeholders in the loop. So if something was going to get shut down, it certainly wouldn't be by me. That's for sure.
Yeah. Oh, I have said no to experiments, and it's because it was someone I've been working with for a while, and I needed them to understand the data side of things. And she literally went, "Oh, I had this idea at 3 a.m." And I was just like, I couldn't sleep. I was just thinking about it. I was like, go on then, tell me. And it was like changing the homepage to like one massive load of accordions. And we'd done like several experiments proving that accordions didn't really work. And I went, why do you think that? I was like, I was going to neaten up the page. I was like, you got any UX principles to support that? I was like, no. Any data? No. Right, I've got data here. Right, these are all the other tests we've done based on accordions. Do you still want to do that? And she went, yeah, no. So yeah, that there are some extreme views where I've said no, and I don't like test ideas that are based on people's waters either.
I think the one thing I would say my side is that I'm not massively involved in the ideation process, right? So I'm very much enabling them to run the experiment and analyze the experiment easily, but I won't necessarily get too hands-on with the ideation. They might come to me and say, oh, you know, we've got this upcoming. I'll say, great, you know, go make sure you keep, you know, UX team in the loop. You make sure you keep them, and they can go through their approval channels for that experiment through that standard process. But I'm not going to be like a bottleneck or a block of that. I'll very much just be an enabler for those guys to run the experiment with as much sort of statistical rigor as possible, and help them analyze it. So I think we're a little bit different to Sky, where we might not be as hands-on in the beginning and be more so as like an enabler.
Do you find that they actually do what you suggested? Do they go speak to UX, for example?
Yeah, I would say that's an example where I would say I wouldn't support you if the right people have not been kept in the loop of an experiment. I think coverage is so important, and obviously DAZN, we're working in over 200 markets now, and we have like local marketing teams. So it's really important to make sure those guys are in the loop of what's going on in their market, right? So that's probably an example of something where I wouldn't support if they just run rogue and not come through that standard process. I think there's very few times I can think of where people would just do their own thing and not put the right approvals in place, because that would probably upset a few people.
Great stuff. Let's move on to a more specific question. Why involve other teams in experimentation? I mean, we've talked about it like it's almost like you have to do it, but actually, what are the biggest benefits for you in involving more people, would you say? Start with Tasha.
I think it's a different point of view. Everyone's got their own area that they specialize in. They're going to look at an experiment slightly different. This is why when we're discussing results or a test idea, we do it as a group, because that person that's worked in UX knows how that works. That person that works in content knows how it works. That person in operations that is working with the customers has information, like I said earlier, that we cannot see through analytics. So getting everyone around a table and going, what should we do? The best ideas come out. I cannot look at a test result and think wider than what I've got in front of me. I don't have full context. So it's much better getting a wider group of people to go, what's next? What's next? And you get more test ideas on the back of that, and they're all more likely to be successful as well.
No, fascinating. So it's almost like it's at the beginning of the process to come up with the ideas in the first place, because they're much closer to their subject area and closer to the customers, aren't they, I guess?
Yeah, 100%. And we're getting everyone more involved with experimentation then. As I said, growing it is about them understanding it and sharing it to their stakeholders too. And we need to work with the likes of tech, for example. I don't want to be building experiments and then they just sit in Optimizely for years on end. We need to get tech involved to say, oh, can you build that? Will this work for you? Does this work that's coming out on the roadmap, etc.? So as many people as possible involved, and your experimentation program will just grow and be better and flourish much more with better results and ideas.
Great.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of that sentiment. I think the biggest thing for me is velocity, right? If you're looking at sort of like one siloed team delivering all of the experiments, that's one team across all of the different realms and departments. You can't really specialize in one particular area, right? So I think if you look at embedding that within the wider teams, you're only going to increase your velocity with that as time goes on, right? Yes, it may slow you down at the start, but longer time as time goes on, I think you're going to actively increase your velocity. These guys are specialists in their area. If you can embed the experimentation principles, it's only natural that you're going to be able to run more experiments in that specific area versus one siloed team across different areas, for example. So I think that's just a natural progression. And I think maturity as well. So like once people start seeing the value in experimentation and what you do, people can start, you've got more allies on board with your program to start taking this across other areas of the business. Like if you look at, what we're doing with the marketing channels now and across with the product experimenters, we've done a pretty good job of self-serve experimentation and making sure that it goes out to the masses. And I think, the more allies you can have for building that culture, building that agenda, then that's going to be, that's going to be the best for your program. So I think the maturity wise, naturally, that's a natural progression for your maturity. And I think often you're trying to tackle the same problems as well, right? I often find that teams are thinking about the same problems, and with that shared knowledge together, like for example, I don't know, strategy and product, for example, they could be thinking about, how can we increase subs this way, or how can we increase engagement? They're trying to tackle the same problems, and with that knowledge around different areas, that's only gonna help the cause. So like one example would be like marketing and product. You're both trying to tackle signups, but marketing have got knowledge in terms of what traffic are we driving? Is it a representative sample, or is this just random promo traffic, or whatever that may be? And then the product, that knowledge for them then helps guide their acquisition-led experiments, right? So you can start to say, was this traffic, different in terms of behavior than our standard traffic? Marketing are the guys to know that, right? That knowledge is really important for those product guys for their experiments, because we want to know how valid that and how representative that traffic is. So I think often you're trying to tackle the same problem, and that knowledge shared together is only going to benefit both parties.
But it's interesting you mentioned the word allies, building allies, because it's almost as if, I know one of the biggest wins of one of our clients was actually winning the hearts and minds of different teams actually was so important. And as soon as we did that, as soon as we actually sold the benefits of experimentation to designers and then sold the benefits of experimentation to a trading team, when we'd done that, it's amazing how enthusiastic they got and how many more better ideas we got, and overall quality and velocity went up. But that takes a bit of work sometimes, doesn't it? It takes different, and I wondered if you had the same experiences of winning those allies.
I think so. I think, yes, I think it makes sense. Sorry to jump in, Tasha. I think, that's just natural, right? Again, one experimentation team is sometimes not enough to get that across the entire organization, right? So you're only looking at a relatively small team. So I think, the more people you can have pushing the agenda, and if someone does something without an experiment being attached to it, challenging them, why is this not done as an experiment? Coverage, on this sort of stuff, that's only going to drive your program forward. So I think it's just a no-brainer really to get as many allies as you can on board.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like I said earlier about listening to someone else talk about experimentation and how amazing it is without you is a big deal. And then, for example, if there's a product owner that's released something without experimenting it, everyone's going to say, "Oh, what are the results? What are the results?" And he's going to go, "Don't know. I didn't do it." It's like, well, why did you do it then? How did you do it? Like, how did you get that out without that? And it makes them look very obvious that they didn't get involved with experimentation. It makes them look like the odd one out. And like Sam said, the more people involved, the better it is for everyone going forward. Having that someone else to shout your corner makes a huge difference.
I think we've still got a long way to go. There's still loads of potential, but I would say one thing that makes me feel proud is when you get BD and marketing teams coming to me and saying, I've got I think we should do some geo-targeted or device targeting specific experiments, quasi methods. And I'm like, these are advanced techniques that we're using, and these guys are coming to me thinking of this sort of experiment design. And I think that when I get that, that makes me feel good, because I'm like, right, this is we're really hitting home with this stuff. So having allies like that, where they're actually thinking about more mature sort of experimental methods, I think that's great, and probably shows how far we've come in a pretty short time frame, really.
Hey, job done for the day.
Still a lot more people
So what are the challenges then with involving loads of different teams? And I mean, you've touched on it a little bit already, but what would you say are the main challenges?
From my point of view, I think thinking of a group of people that are normally difficult to work with is probably operations. I mentioned this earlier. They've got a very backwards way of thinking. They don't think data-driven. It's all very opinion. But when they come to me wanting to experiment, they don't understand digital, never mind experimentation. So they've come up with this idea. They want to copy someone else's journey and they want it next week. And I go, you want to build a full journey? That's like 6 months of development. Digital is so difficult. They won't do what I want, blah, 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 blah. And that's hard when someone's coming to you thinking you're going to be difficult. But then they've been told the experimentation team's the quick way to get it done. But they can think of such crazy ideas that you can't really do it through an experimentation platform. We have to make it sizable chunks. So that's hard when you're teaching someone digital, you're teaching someone data, you're teaching someone experimentation. It's a lot of patience and it's a lot of reiterating the same point over and over again. But when they do finally get it, it's amazing. It's a great relief just to go, and they've got it. But it's a lot of frustration to start with, and it's a lot of going, no, we can't do that. No, let's think about it this way. No, that's not the best idea. Let's get some data here. Oh, I didn't know we could do this. Yes, we can. Just like, let's slow it down. And they're very much on delivery dates. So ops at the moment are trying to work in an agile way. They've had an agency come on to teach them agile. But yet they go, oh, I've got a showcase next Thursday, so I need this done by then. I was like, that's not agile, guys. And they're like, but my showcase. I'm like, no, it doesn't work like that. We're not working towards a delivery date. So yeah, I would say that's hard when you've got to teach them more than just experimentation.
I feel for you.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think my side, I would say some of the challenges are, I think, making people aware of like the statistical concepts. Like, say, for example, I'm working with like finance and revenue teams, trying to explain to them that this drop, you know, it's not statistically significant, you know, or it's got a pretty low power value. I think trying to explain these concepts to people that are, you know, judged on financial performance and then small incremental gains in the financials, trying to explain that to them, it's very tough because, you know, they're blinkered by their own objectives and KPIs. If they see a 3% drop in conversion and I'm trying to explain, and they've seen it for the first, you know, week of the experiment or whatever, and I'm trying to explain to them, you know, we still don't know if this is a real effect, right? That sometimes is quite challenging because, you know, as I say, they're judged on them tiny financial gains. So I think that's probably the thing that I find the biggest challenge, to be honest, is experimenting with revenue and finance teams, or when they're involved in the experiment. Yeah.
So what's the solution then? Do you feel like you don't want to tell them everything?
Yeah, I think I've sort of learned the hard way with this on quite a few occasions, to be honest. Not sharing results too early, you know, not letting anyone but, you know, the data scientist or the experimentation managers actually, you know, dissect the results, and that's where the dangers of peaking comes in. But with Optimizely, obviously you get a lot of capabilities out of the box, and good reporting quality. So you know, yeah, I've definitely learned the hard way with that, and just making sure that, you know, we only look at it when we reach our sample size, or, you know, when the experiment's finished, and we leave that down to the data scientist. But I've definitely run into that challenge in the past, and, you know, it's only natural. Sometimes when you have a risky experiment, stakeholders want to be kept in the loop every few days, because then they're judged on the financial performance. So it's only natural. But a big part of my role is to say, look, it's really dangerous for us to be doing this. I can give you a top line summary. It's fine. It's fine. We're not seeing anything. I can give you that. But until the end of the experiment, I can't give you anything watertight. But as I say, when revenue teams and their objectives are around those financial gains, I think that's sometimes a real challenge, is getting that point across. Look, I'm only going to give you a top line summary. And sometimes it may be a case of then just being like, look, this is what we're seeing. It's really nothing. I promise you, bear with us, wait another week for the experiment to finish, and we will ping you a much more detailed view of the results. But yeah, as I say, I think that's probably something that I find the biggest challenge.
Yeah, we've had that at Sky, been burnt by that, sharing results too early. It's something we say at the beginning now. Like, I'll put this experiment live, but you're not going to hear from me for a couple of weeks now. I'm not going to share anything till it's done.
I think we're pretty well rehearsed in that, and for a generic experiment. But when you get these big ones, right, it's bit where everyone wants to be kept in the loop of it. That's where I find it quite challenging. And to be honest with you, I thought we'd done a pretty good job of making people aware. And then I had one recently, and it was like, why are we seeing this? You know, this is, you know, why is it failing? And I'm like, oh God, back to, you know, maybe we need to get back to basics and explain this again, because it was a little bit concerning. But I say it's only natural, right? Sometimes you've got to do some reminders with teams, but yeah, it's definitely something I find the biggest challenge.
It's human nature, isn't it, to want to find out if it's possible. And then we haven't spent too long on this, but this is always really interesting to think about all the different types of operating models. This is something that we're working on a lot at the moment with clients, is almost optimizing the operating models for them. But where do you guys sit, would you say?
Sky's very much a hybrid model at the moment. I think a lot of the issues with Sky is politics. It's such a large organization. As I mentioned at the beginning, the website's split, so service, trading, but trading then splits even further into, I think, another 6 groups. And we all work differently. We all use different technology, and we all do some sort of testing, but whether it's decent A/B testing, I'm not sure. So obviously, the centre of excellence, which sounds like Sam's slightly more got, is the dream, but it's getting through all that politics first, which is difficult at such a large corporation.
And Sky is huge, isn't it? Of course. Yeah. It's like loads of different companies in some ways, I imagine.
Yes, it is, and we're all doing the same thing, but somewhere else, and not talking to each other.
I think that's probably where I feel quite lucky at DAZN. Obviously, we've only been around for like a fair few years now, so I think we've been able to build like a decentralized model where we are working to a center of excellence model. My reporting line is obviously more into the marketing subscription realm, but I do work really closely with like our product experimentation scientists. And we've sort of built out our own, I guess you could call it like an experimentation council. And like across the entire like commercial side of the business, I would say, yeah, the large majority of teams would know to use us as some form of research for experimentation. Resource for experimentation. Doesn't mean to say that if there isn't a good experiment or good, if I see a piece of data that UX have done or on like our marketing channels, it doesn't mean I can't then go to the marketing channels and say, look guys, there's this research, let's run this experiment, because there are times then when that happens, that's only natural. But I think on the whole, we're probably working to a decentralized model in terms of the experimentation process, but a centralized experimentation council across both subscription and product. And to be fair, like most of the business will know to sort of use us as a resource for it.
No, it's fascinating. It's always, I don't think there's always a best solution, and actually the best solution may be a bit of a mix of different models, to be honest.
I think, yeah, it's just, I guess you could just summarize it as I just work as a subject matter expert consultant with my stakeholders, like with the wider marketing and business development teams. That's in a nutshell how we're sort of working with those guys.
Yeah, and I think me and Sam said this before. We've both been that individual team, one person sort of business before, which is quite fun when you get to do absolutely everything, but there's just no room for scale at all. But it's great having complete control.
I think it's the sad reality. I do miss doing the end-to-end process, but yeah, as Natasha says, you can't scale that, right? You're one team versus an entire organization. So it's the best way to go, I think.
No, it's a fascinating one, isn't it? Because actually, I still think the individual team is often the easiest way for organizations to get started. I still think it's perhaps the easy thing to do, to at least get started and prove the value at a very kind of low maturity. But it's rather than what do you guys think that you could jump straight to a decentralized or a hybrid model if say an organization hasn't done much experimentation in the past?
Say that one again, Chris. Sorry, I missed that. Chris.
So do you think? I always think the individual team is almost like a good starting point, but I'm wondering whether it is possible to jump straight to a decentralized model if, say, you've never done much experimentation before.
I think so. A CRO person's basically a unicorn. They're supposed to be good at what? Data analysis, hypothesis writing, coding. They're supposed to be a salesperson. They're upskilling. They're supposed to be a data scientist on the back of it. Nobody can be good at all of them. You want people with different backgrounds looking at it. And some people need to be like UX designers at the same time. So, yeah, get someone with different backgrounds, different experts. You've got the start of your hybrid team. because not everyone is going to be good at everything. It's just not possible.
Absolutely. All right.
Sorry, go on.
No, go on, Sam. Go for it.
Yeah, I think you probably could go straight into it with the right, say, senior leadership buy-in, and you had the right person managing the centre of excellence that's experienced in what they're doing. I think you could potentially go straight to that model. I don't think it necessarily needs to mature, but that's been the natural progression for many of us, and I'm sure many of the people on the call as well. So it is a natural progression, but I don't think there's any reason why you couldn't jump straight in with the right buy-in for the program.
Actually, I've got a relevant question here because we're coming to the end, but I think we can go on for another 5 minutes or so if people are all right. And this is recorded, by the way, so everybody can catch up if they have to go now. A couple of questions from Richard here. One is, in decentralized models, how do you ensure there isn't too much conflict with A/B tests, or are you fine with tests overlapping?
So I'm in quite a lucky position that I work with an exceptionally talented data science team on the product side, and they've actually built a tool that can help detect things like this. And we also work really closely in that experimentation council, where we will just talk about experiments that are going on. So I think naturally, that level of coverage and communication helps us sort of dissect which experiments are upcoming, and just decide, whether it's danger to overlap those or potentially run one after the other.
Cool. Is that kind of similar for you, Tasha, as well? Are you okay with the if there are several different teams having ideas over time? Is it kind of your job to handle that roadmap and make sure they're not conflicting?
Yeah, pretty much. So we have a central Jira board which has all the experiments on across the whole entire service area, so we can see if there's any issues with anything overlapping. And in a lot of cases where they are slightly overlapping, we can normally bring the tests together because they're slightly similar ideas, just from a different point of view.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. And then there's another question here as well we can cover off, I think, at this point, is, do you use prioritization methods to ensure the best ideas are tested? And what criteria do you use to judge whether an idea should be tested or not?
So prioritization at Sky is very much done with the tech guys and product. So what's next on the roadmap for them, and what do we need to do to get there? And then anything quick win, if it's going to be a simple, that's going to take me 10 minutes to build sort of thing, we've got that involved. And we obviously have the lovely help of Creative CX and the developer Mo that helps us get any tricky tests through pretty quickly. So yeah, it's a team effort. What's most important to product owners and tech for what's next.
Cool. All right, great. So we've got a couple of questions left. What makes a modern experimenter then, you guys, other than just being Sam or Tasha or copying what you guys do? What kind of skills do you think a modern experimenter needs, and what's benefited you really in the work you do?
Patience. I think I said this earlier. You're going to be continually teaching people. Like a lot of people know that, I think we've touched on this, they want to experiment, but like they may forget statistical significance. I've had people higher up go, oh, can we test that again? I'm like, no, why? So it's about continuously teaching people and being patient till they actually get it. And I think we're also working in experimentation. You have an advantage in the fact you can look at the bigger picture. You can step back and you can go, right, what's going on over here in .com? What's going on in the bots over here? How can we make that journey consistent for everyone? Because what you'll find, these teams don't speak to each other, but the experimentation team are part of that. So I think we've got a very unique view of being able to step back and bring everyone together to actually work better for a customer journey point of view.
I would echo the point on patience. I think, you need to be understanding that these people are not familiar with experimentation, and you can't get frustrated by it. You've just got to, go with it and be patient with them as they start to build out a bit of momentum for their program. And I think things like emotional intelligence come with that as well, in being able to, don't get frustrated with these teams, just, handhold them through their journey, and be there with them at every step of the way. So I think ultimately you want to be someone that they want to work with. If you are getting visibly, oh God, you've done this again, you've made this mistake, then it's only you that's going to feel the effects of that, because they're just not going to want to experiment, and they'll go back to their own old ways of making assumptions and not knowing how many incremental subs things drove and things like that. So, it's only you that reaps the downfall of that. So I think, you need to be understanding, patient, emotionally intelligent. I think you need to be accepting that your opinion is that's what it is. It's no more than that. And my opinion, although I've got good access to what experiments have worked in the past, it's still just an assumption. It's still just an opinion, and you need to take that out of the room. So you've got to be quite dignified and with that, and again, practice what you preach. And I think you still obviously need to just be solid technically as well. I think as I've gone on, I think the statistical side of what I do has become, of utmost, the primary focus of what I do. And, if you could summarize it, my role is to make sure that, there's data-led decisioning, but ultimately we're not rolling things out that detriment our marketing spend or the product. So the best way of doing that is to be, to have your guardrails and to make sure you're running it with the utmost statistical rigor. So I think you need to be prepared to read constantly on the statistical side, because even me now, I'm learning every day. I'm reading different research papers, and our experimentation scientists are always pinging me stuff. So it's great, but I think it's really important that people are prepared to put in the groundwork for running better experiments through the statistical methods.
Yeah, no, cool. Some really good advice. And it sounds like from both of you, it's those relationship skills are probably really important too. The fact of being patient and having to kind of walk people through and be that kind of teacher, really, or that coach as such.
Yeah, I think that, if you look at it, these guys are the ones doing the bulk of the work, the building of the experiments, right? A lot of the time. So stakeholder management is so important, and that's basically what you can summarize mine and Tasha's points there in one is just stakeholder management, right? So I think that's of utmost importance, to be honest. You've got to find a good way of managing that relationship and building up some rapport.
Yeah, it's being flexible with them too. Not one person's the same. Some stakeholders are far more advanced than others, and some need more hand-holding than others. So, flexible with it at the same time.
Cool. And then the last question actually was, what advice would you give to other experimenters looking to scale experimentation? So it's quite a big question, really. But or possibly, what's the top one or two things that you would suggest to them, Tasha?
I would say, obviously, get comfortable with failure. Get your stakeholders to understand that failing's good, and encourage them to fail more. Encourage them to try the crazy ideas. Encourage them to go, it's okay to fail because we've learned something, and tell them to love the learnings as much as the wins. After doing experimentation for so long, I prefer a failure now. I much prefer it. The learnings on the back of it are invaluable, and that's what you want to teach your stakeholders, and they'll be more freeing with their ideas, and they'll be more willing to try things because they won't be scared of that failure.
Thank you.
Yeah, echo that sentiment for sure. And I'll give an answer as well that I think a lot of people on the call won't necessarily like, but I think one of the most important ways that we was actually able to drive growth at DAZN is senior leader buy-in. And I think you get a lot more buy-in for the program when you have senior leaders drilling it top down, unfortunately. So that is just a reality. And that's, in the last 3 places I've worked, I've seen that same process, and that's been the best way to drive any sort of growth. So I think, building out a good business case for why we should be experimenting, show the money that we're throwing away from not doing things, from not experimenting, the opportunity cost, cost benefit analysis on experimentation, build up a good business case, get your senior stakeholders on board, and start hitting it top down is something I would say. And I know that's not what a lot of people on the call would want to hear, but I think that's the harsh reality sometimes.
I mean, I'm sure they'll relate to getting the buy-in. I suppose what you're thinking is if it's top-down ideas, actually, that's when it gets a bit trickier, doesn't it? Of course.
I think you've just got to, again, in the business case, you've got to make that clear. We're not asking you senior leaders to come up with the ideas. We're asking you to challenge people. Well, how many incremental subs did this drive? Was it statistically significant? Or just basic top-level questions. Just asking leaders to ask these sort of questions. What's the incremental impact of this campaign? Do you know? What's the incremental impact of this product feature? That's senior leaders start challenging it. It's really going to get people thinking about the way that they do things and the way that they operate. So that's more what I'm thinking. Definitely not any sort of opinion-led leader ideas for sure.
Great, really good advice, guys. And then I asked a couple of questions already. We haven't got too long. We've actually gone over. There's two last questions I'd like to ask from people. From Jara here, do you visualize your experiments in any way with the rest of the company to help instill a sense of experimentation culture? If so, how are you doing this and what do you include? So I'm guessing it's all about, do you kind of share the experiments company-wide?
Yes, I think I will run a lot of say quarterly what we call look back sessions, and we'll just use it as a forum for people to discuss learnings from the quarter, from the experiments that we run. So ask different teams to start contributing, and then we'll just use that as an open forum to discuss some of the test results. That sparks some pretty good conversation. So that sort of drives that experimentation culture, gets people thinking about experiments, gets leaders on the call, and that's sort of grown. I sent it to a few stakeholders at the start, and it's probably 20 times the amount than when I first started, and that's from people just forwarding it on, which is normally a pretty good sign. We also have Jira dashboards, as Tasha was saying, Confluence, where we'll have feed in tickets into Confluence dashboards and do what we can there. There's loads of things going on in terms of coverage, because people are just desperate for more coverage with experimentation. And I think that's quite natural as you start to grow, that people will get these requests, as I was mentioning earlier. So to answer your question, Jara, we'll use those tools, and we do get a lot of requests for more and more coverage.
Yeah, so we do something similar. So we have fortnightly meetings where we go through all the recent experimentation results, learnings, any ideas on the back of that. So that is more for immediate stakeholders. And then we have a separate session is for more the director levels and above, which we have a target set. We've got to reduce X amount of calls by the end of the year. And we measure that through experimentation. So we'd go through the results of the last couple of weeks, what experiments we've run and what we've learned on the back of it, and how we're performing against our target. So we're getting, everyone is seeing the same amount of experiments and results every couple of weeks.
No, that's great. Really useful insights there. And I think we'll wrap up there. But a huge thank you, Tasha and Sam. It's been a really great insight into how you do things over at Sky and DAZN. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Chris.
And just a bit of to end things, we'll do our best to answer a couple of remaining questions. So we'll answer them and add them to an email. The videos will be sent out shortly in a follow-up email. And just a reminder that the Conversion Elite Conference and Awards will be happening in March next year, which is exciting. And actually, it should be March 2022. I just noticed a typo on that one. It says 21. And yes, feel free to get in touch with any of us if you have more questions. But thank you, everybody, for watching today. And we'll wrap up there.
Thank you.
Guys.
Thanks, everyone.